Shalom. This week we are reading the Torah portion of Noach. Just last week we began reading the Torah anew in Parashat Bereshit. We read about the creation of the world, about Adam and Eve and their sin and banishment from the Garden of Eden, and all the subsequent generations of their descendants. By the time we reached the end of the portion, and a mere 10 generations had passed, the knowledge of God had vanished from the face of the earth. And what's more, we read back at the end of Bereshit, chapter 6, we read, "And Hashem saw that the wickedness of man was great in the earth, and every imagination of his heart was only evil all the time. And Hashem regretted that he had made man upon the earth, and he became grieved in his heart. And Hashem said, I will blot out man, whom I created, from upon the face of the earth, from man to cattle to creeping thing, to the fowl of the heavens, for I regret that I made them." Our sages teach that this generation, the generation of the flood, as it's known, was the most immoral, wicked, depraved group in history. If, as we just read, Hashem regretted that he made man, why then did he deem it necessary to destroy all life on earth, you may be wondering? What did the animals do to deserve this? But as soon as Parashat Noach begins, we will read in verse 12, "And God saw the earth, and behold, it had become corrupted, for all flesh had corrupted its way on the earth. And Hashem said to Noach, the end of all flesh has come before me." So our sages teach that man's negative influence on the earth was so all-pervading, the impurity, the rot that he spread was so powerful, that the earth itself became corrupt and vile and untenable. For example, man's immorality was so overwhelming that the animals unnaturally copulated outside their species. Onto this scene comes Noach. The last verse, last week in Parashat Bereshit we read, "But Noach found favor in the eyes of Hashem." Then Parashat Noach begins now, chapter 6 and verse 9. These are the generations of Noach. Noach was a righteous man, a tzaddik, tamim, perfect in his generations. Noach walked with God. The verses continue. Noach begot 3 sons, Shem, Cham, and Yafet. Now the earth was corrupt before God, and the earth became full of robbery. And God saw the earth, and behold, it had become corrupted, for all flesh had corrupted its way on the earth. And God said to Noach, the end of all flesh has come before me, for the earth has become full of robbery because of them, and behold, I am destroying them from the earth. Now we read here, these are the generations of Noach. Noach was a righteous man. He was perfect bidorotav, in his generations. Noach walked with God. There's a famous teaching here of our sages that Rashi cites, and they state as follows. What does it mean he was perfect in his generation, bidorotav? Some of our sages interpreted this word bidorotav favorably. They say, how much more so? If he had only lived in a generation of righteous people, he would have been even more righteous. But others interpret it derogatorily, and they say, in comparison with his generation, he was righteous. But if he had been in, for example, Abraham's generation, he would not have been considered of any importance. So that's what they say. They say some interpret this for praise. Had he lived in a righteous generation, he would have been even more righteous, and some for derision. He was only a tzaddik, a righteous man, in his generation. Had he lived in Abraham's generation, he would have been insignificant. But the question is, if it's possible to interpret the words favorably, why interpret them also unfavorably? And the Torah itself testifies, we just read the verse, Noach was a tzaddik. He was a righteous man, perfect in his generation. So how could this interpretation about comparison to Abraham's generation be made? What's it coming to teach us? And indeed, why did the Torah indeed add this word, in his generation, and later state, I have found you a tzaddik, a righteous man, before me in this generation? Because really, whether ultimately the word bidorotav, in his generation, is employed by the Torah for the purpose of praise, or it is actually derogatory, would it not have been sufficient to state that he was a tzaddik, tamim, perfect, and thus he was saved from the waters of the flood. And I mean, this is the man who saved the world. And through him, a new world was built. Now, again, some interpret it favorably. This is the very ancient teaching. Like, whoa, he was so righteous. Imagine if he would only have been in a time with other righteous people for him to associate with that would have given him support, he could have been even greater. Others interpret it derisively. Yeah, he was righteous in the context of his generation because there was no one else, but if he would have been in a generation of towering examples, he would have been outshined into irrelevancy. I don't understand this. I mean, we're talking about the man who God deemed worthy of being saved, the only one in his generation. Even the members of his family were only saved in his merit. And he had the merit of saving the entire world and facilitating the restart of creation, and about whom the Torah testifies, God said he was perfect in his righteousness. God walked with him. And you I have seen as righteous. Listen carefully to this, because I'm saying, what difference really does it make what he was like compared to anyone else? What difference should that make? What difference does it make to speculate about a different scenario? I never heard of such a thing. Why it could have been played out differently, who he could have become had he lived at a different time, but he didn't. So why should this question interest us? He lived when he lived. He was who he was. He did what he did. And since we know that the Torah and its lessons for us are as deep as can possibly be, so deep, and we know that the Torah's lessons are for us now, for all of us, for all time, and they are not theoretical, but they impact our very lives and how we can live to become better people, to become the people that we can and must become. And since we know that every lesson contains a personal message for us about how we can improve ourselves now and how we can better serve God, and it's all very personal, this Torah of ours, and it's about us. Just like last week, we emphasized that the creation, beginning the Torah anew each year with Bereshit is about the belief that Hashem is recreating the world again, but even more so, that we can also be recreated again. And it's about believing not only in Hashem, but just as much as about believing in ourselves. So since all this is true, I want to take this in a different direction. I want to offer a different understanding to this statement of our holy sages. I want to offer you an idea that applies to each and every one of us. So open up your heart now. You know what this is really all about, this cryptic statement that some explain the Torah's words? He was righteous in his generation as praise, and some interpret it negatively. It's really very simple. You know what the sages are really telling us? Somebody is always going to put you down. Who you really are, measured by your deeds, what you have accomplished as well as what you would like to, your aspirations, your dreams. Some are going to say, that's so great. But there are always going to be others who are going to say, you're just not good enough. So, you know, people have a tendency to judge others, and we even judge ourselves by comparison. Why can't I be more like him? Why can't you be more like him? And that is so destructive and insensitive, and the opposite of how a person should be appreciated, nurtured, and empowered to be the best that they can be. I have a friend who's over 70, and I know he's not going to be watching this, and he won't hear about this, so he won't be embarrassed. He won't know who he is. A friend who's over 70, and he's still plagued and haunted by the memory of his mother saying to him when he was a little boy, why can't you be more like Howard Mermelstein? Why can't you be like Howard Mermelstein? And now maybe Howard Mermelstein was a really good boy, but we can't all be Howard Mermelstein. Now, there's a very famous teaching of our sages that in the future world, a person is called to give a reckoning. The individual is not asked, why weren't you like Moses? How come you didn't become like this or that great person? Why didn't you rise to his level? Rather, the question posed to every soul is, why did you not become yourself? The person you could have been, the person you were meant to be. Why didn't you rise to your own potential to become yourself? This is the avodah. The service of God, the unique path for serving God, first of all, is different in every generation. Every generation has its own goals and purpose. So what was needed in the time of Noach was different than what was needed in the time of Abraham. And the same is true for every individual in every milieu. Serving God is just about the most personal thing that there is. And each of us serve Him according to who we are, and not according to who we aren't, not according to someone else. This controversy over Noach's righteousness, was it intrinsically imperative? Was it really him, or was it only because there was nobody else around to compare him to? This isn't only about Noach, because the Torah is eternal and its messages for all time, for every generation and for each and every one of us. Each of us could save the world, but that's just not good enough for some people. So Noach reached perfection and was able to perform what his generation required, which teaches us that every generation has its own particular needs and its own unique approach to serving God, and there is someone or some people in every generation that can save that generation too, and the same is true of each person every day of our lives. And Noach teaches us that each and every one of us must strive to be the best that we can possibly be, who we are here and now, because it's truly up to each and every one of us to save the world.